Sherman's reflection here. It is true that on Fridays, as you pointed out, they do this Death to America rally, but I think part of the problem is they could add Thursday or maybe Wednesday to the schedule. But on the other hand, as Mr. Sherman has raised over the years, as we've looked in and dug into this issue, we do have a situation in Iran today where Iran's supreme leader controls what is a $95 billion business empire. It's called the execution of the Imam Khomeini's order, the Sitold, as they call it in Farsi. And that holds stakes in every sector, every major sector of the Iranian economy: finance, oil, telecommunications. This accumulation of wealth has come from confiscated property and assets. And I would just point out that nearly every member of the House has voted for a similar provision to what Congressman Pollack and Fitzpatrick have put in this effort here to shine a light on the endemic problem of corruption in Iran. We had that vote, and we passed it off the floor on a vote of 400 to 20 in July of 2013. This was developed by the Foreign Affairs Committee, myself and Mr. Sherman and other members. The human rights sanctions contained in that legislation required reporting on the conduct of specific Iranian government officials and their estimated net worth. So corruption in Iran has not improved since that time when we overwhelmingly passed that legislation. And I thank the gentleman here for shining a light on this. I think Iran's formal and informal economy is frankly a breeding ground for corruption, for nepotism, for foreign companies that should be wary of approaches by government officials who demand bribes or fixes, as we know, who would then pay bribes on behalf of foreign companies. Many of Iran's top officials have thrived in this environment of corruption, in this environment of nepotism. So it's become the way that people in Iran, or not the people do business, is the way that those who are tied into the regime do business. It's the people that we would like to assist, but they're only going to be assisted if there is transparency in what's going on. If a U.S. or foreign company or their subsidiaries were to engage in this behavior, they'd be potentially subject, of course, to penalties under the U.K. Bribery Act or our Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, as we know. It is, frankly, why the information itself is so important. It's why it's so important for Persians, for Iranians to know this information. It provides the necessary transparency and highlights the corruption risk of doing business in Iran for foreign companies. And it publicly highlights the cost of regime-based corruption for who? For the Iranian people, so that they can understand the consequences of this. That's what manages to surface under the exposure and the sunlight of this legislation. I think it's critical to ensuring that companies that are seeking to do business there are fully aware of the risks they face, but it's even more critical for the people in the country to understand exactly what is happening in country when you have that kind of accumulation of wealth through the seizure of all those companies and assets and its transfer not only to the Ayatollah, but to his allies there that run the government. So I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back. And I thank Mr. Sherman for his comments.
Gentleman yields back.